Welcome back. The government has issued an advisory to employers to encourage participation of women in the workforce with emphasis on balance between employment and care responsibilities, adequate representation of women in management positions as well, and supporting women entrepreneurs and eliminating gender bias in recruitment, promotion, and performance review. If you look at what really has been the participation of women in the labor force, the periodic labor force survey, which is done by the NSSO, actually has shown improvement, at least of a 4% improvement if you look in just a year ago, from 2021 to 22 to 23, 24. If you compare it, it's almost a 4% increase. But what does this really mean? Where are we really positioned? We have another budget is right upon us, but what does that really mean for women in workforce? What does this advisory really mean for us? Sonika Aaron, founder Marching Sheep, joins us right now. Along with her on my panel are also Devapriya Khanna, CEO for Connexus Global Ventures, and Dr. Ashwin Kapoor, MD UD Products. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us. Let me just come straight to you because it's best to hear all three of you, even though I also come from a sector where parity is definitely a huge challenge. And so are women in top positions, though the organizations I have been part of are a big exception. However, let me just straight dive to Sonika Aaron. Sonika, what are your big findings? You know, one of the things that really struck me, this advisory that has been issued is, of course, a positive step. But if you look at what it really points out to, nothing really seems to be have changed in so many decades. As long as I can see, it's the same points that are being highlighted again and again. The biggest reason that seems to come up of why women are falling off their career radar, even for the urban woman in today's time, seems to be childcare.
You're absolutely right. So, when I was going through the advisory, if I see there are four pillars broadly that they're looking at. The first one is systemic, right? They're saying, look at the policies, paternity policy, flexibility, and so on and so forth. The second is where they're saying, look at infrastructure. You should have hostels and chummeries and dormitories and safety, transportation, and so on and so forth. The third piece where they're talking about governance models, saying that, you should check for pay parity. There should be a mechanism for rating of organizations, how they are doing as far as gender, equity is concerned or inclusion is concerned. And lastly, they're talking about mindset, like you said, recruitment, unconscious bias, and so on and so forth. The issue is that, all this has been spoken about for so many years. I started my career in 2001, and I have been working as a DEI consultant since 2013. And the issue is that until and unless we address mindsets, because organization is a subunit of the society, until and unless we address the very issue where caretaking is primarily a woman's job, until and unless we change that mindset, we will continue to face these roadblocks, these obstacles. The good part is that they have looked at that first part where I said systemically introducing parental policies, paternity policies, where they're trying to shift that focus, and which to my mind is a good thing. The second piece where they're saying that introduce, and in that, a large number of organizations where construction, infrastructure, your large,
Absolutely.
organizations which are in, let's say, the power sector, which till now say that we can't have women on site, will come into the ambit because now they will have if the implementation goes through, because now
Hmm.
they will have that infrastructure piece in place.
Right.
I
Sonika,
hope I
let me
have
just
answered your
interrupt you
question.
at this point. You're making some very important points. No, no, certainly. Let me also just get in the introductory remarks from others as well. Devapriya Khanna, you're a CEO. How do you look at this advisory? Of course, there are some very crucial aspects to this advisory, but just as an introductory remark, how do you really look at this?
I just want to look at it initially at a very macro level. So just roll back and look at the larger picture here. India today is well established globally as a credible business partner, as a preferred investment destination. It is a rapidly growing market. India's talent, markets, growth, and opportunities actually drive brand India, right? And we're seeing it on every global stage. Now, the thing is, we all know that
Hmm.
women entrepreneurship or women economic empowerment not only leads to empowerment, but also fuels a nation's economic growth, right? Women will contribute
Hmm.
significantly to the workforce in India over the next few decades, and this is going to help shape the nation's future. And according to a report by the IBEF, the India Brand Equity Foundation, more than 30 million women owned enterprises are predicted to create about 150 to 170 million jobs by 2030. The numbers are staggering. And if you actually look at it practically, these statistics underscore the idea that women's participation in business isn't just a matter of representation, it is also a recipe of economic success. you know but if you look at
Hmm.
some other numbers, you'll see that when you look at GDP, right, equal work opportunities have the potential to contribute to a substantial 18% increase in India's GDP by 2025. But what's the picture today? Presently, women constitute only 22% of India's GDP. And that's a figure significantly lower than the global average of 45%. Right? And if we look at what happened yesterday on Tuesday in a strong push to enhance share of women in the workforce, the central government came up with a set of measures. You may say that these have been happening for a long time, and the same things are coming up again and again. However, I feel reiteration and actually going back to basics, and as Sonika said, implementation and execution is what is going to bridge the gap, the statistical gap that we mentioned
Absolutely.
about. So I think we are on the right
Very
track, and
important
I think we
points.
should laud the policies that have come
True.
into existence, or the proposals that have
Right.
come
Dr.
into
Ashwin
existence.
Kapoor. Right. Dr. Ashwin Kapoor, and I have to ask you this. You're the only male panelist here in our panel. Uh, with the companies that you have been part of for the decades that you have been in the workforce,
Okay.
have you
So at the
seen changes in how paternity and maternity leaves can really bring about? We have, okay, 26-week maternity leave, at least in some sectors, even though it's supposed to be everywhere, that's not the case. But paternity leave, where are the equal shareholders? That itself goes out of the window.
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say that for once, I'm very pleased to be a part of a panel where the females women are outnumbering the men 3-1. So I think that's a good start. That talks about Nari force. So I belong to the
Sir, how many
automobile
board?
sector. So
You may
I
have
my
been,
my
part of a lot of top management companies. I have to ask you this, sir. How many
yeah.
have you seen this kind of a representation in any of the companies that you have been part of?
So I like to just state, in terms of maternity leave, we are still at the nascent stage. If you look at the automobile sector per se, there is no general policy. It varies from company to company. And I think we have a long way to go. You see, one of the things we must realize is that to break the glass ceiling, maternity leave is only one aspect. We've got to take a holistic approach in terms of how do
Absolutely.
you break the glass ceiling. So one has to, you talked about a 37% workforce participation by women, but this is still woefully low compared to a global figure of women participation of 46%. Even if you look at the World Economic Forum's general parity ranking, India ranks 135 amongst 146 countries. So we have a long way to go. Now, you see, let's look at India, the automobile sector, as India aspires to be the third largest economy by 2030. It has to become cost competitive. And to do this, there is no other way but to increase the women participation in the country, because this gender gap in employment is not a good sign for economic development. You see, now, if you look at the automobile sector in general, it is not purely about manufacturing. This is a misnomer. Today we are having greater and greater role played by the service sector in the way of chip design, software development, R&D, where I think there is a great value add. And women, you see, one of the great problems hitherto has been that it was the job was demanding in terms of physical demanding, but this is changing now. I think a lot of companies have introduced low cost automation where
Right.
they've reduced the physical element and gotten for automation. Plus, the other thing we are now seeing is that a lot of automobile companies, even first tier companies, are having R&D centers. They have they are building their own what we call centers of excellence, where not only HR, women finding employment, but in terms of data analytics and what have you. So this, in other words, I
Dr.
think
Ashwin,
in
let
the
me
future,
interrupt
if you
you.
would.
I'm really sorry. There seems to be some technical issue. We're not able to get a frame. We're not able to see you. While my team tries to fix that, let me also just go across to others as well, back to others as well in the panel. Sonika, there are so many important aspects that each one of you have brought out. Tell me something in the different sectors that you have spoken of, like what even Dr. Ashwin Kapoor was mentioning about in the automobile sector, which is a very male-dominated sector otherwise. If you look at, say, even the construction sector, and that's one focus that has been there for the advisories, what do you see as the biggest impediments in 2024 for women to be part of the workforce?
So, typically when, whether it is automobile or it is construction, the first and foremost, the pushback that comes is that the kind of on ground conditions that are there, the mindset of people is that it is not amenable for women. Now, many times the choice is not given to women whether they even want to be there or not. The perception that it is not suitable for women is already there. So that's the first obstacle. The second obstacle is that many times these locations are in remote places. So the access to reach these places might not be very easy. So now when they are saying that, provide for hostels, dormitories, transport, and so on, then this may be, something which can be easily overcome. The third that they are talking about is that let us not have this, unconscious bias or bias trainings when it comes to recruitment. If you have talent, irrespective of gender, let's get people in. I know of a lot of manufacturing setups, irrespective of industry, whether it is automotive or heavy engineering, where there are women on the shop floor and they are working in remote locations where they have taken the plunge and they are driving those forklifts, they are doing welding and so on and so forth. So I think that these three, and women go through different life stages. It is not just maternity. Yes, child care is there, but there is also elderly care. There is also those class 10th and 12th. There is also relocation of husband. So there are different life stages. But then we need to go past that and start looking at that
Right.
it's a partnership that a man and a woman get into, and it is also a man who can
Hmm.
possibly stay with the wife. So
Fair enough. Absolutely. And that's why, some words that have been used in this advisory, like gender neutral
gender
crash
neutral.
services, crash breaks.
Yes,
All of these things are perhaps very important. They were very welcome. It made me smile when I read that at least a government notification has words like that. That is
it
a
is
step somewhere in
it is
some
in fact
direction.
quite
Devapriya
holistic.
Khanna, we
Sorry, I was saying it's
right.
quite
Devapriya
holistic.
Khanna, we are on the verge of another budget. We are on the verge of another budget. What are your expectations? Are you expecting anything big in this?
So it's not a matter of expecting anything major or anything big. I think we have to focus on the basics, as I already said. And if you just look at the kind of advisory that has come in, we are looking at a lot of practical aspects. So, for example, if you say review of audits of pay structures to close the gender gap, that if even that is instituted, I think at the corporate level there'll be a huge motivation for women to stick on and not jump off, for them to work towards you'll see that the broken rung is slowly getting mended, right? So my perspective really is that let's not
Hmm.
look at quantum jumps. Let's look at baby steps. But execution of those baby steps and those little measures will actually add to really creating a big impact. If you look at the International Women's Day theme of last year, it was talking about embracing equity, right? And that was more of a soft approach. If you look at the theme for this year, it is really invest in women, accelerate progress, right? So when you look at something like that, what is going on? We are taking a very practical notion about getting some concrete steps
Hmm.
done. So I think let we are taking it a stage at a time. So from
All right.
theory to a small level of execution to something that is going to be more broad based on a macro level. So my expectations are, let's just fix what is broken. Let's not look at grandiose schemes, but at least let the small things get done. And I think the advisory that's come is very,
Sure.
very powerful in pointing to the right directions. For example, balance between employment, caregiving responsibilities for men and women, um, balance in creche
Absolutely. And that's why we
facilities,
use the
time
word gender
at the creche.
neutral. No, absolutely,
It
Devapriya.
is and gender neutral and
Right.
gender
In fact, my
agnostic.
last question, possibly, we're running out of time. We're running out of time. Dr. Ashwin Kapoor, my last question to you. And, you know, passion is one place, passion can take you so far, but many times, and specifically when it comes to gender, pay parity and pay is also hugely important. Do you see that disparity widen or diminish perhaps in the next 2, 3 years? Do you see a way forward in that direction?
Good question. I think it has to diminish, and we are already beginning to see signs in it. In terms of, if you look at the figures also, there was a 20, as per Oxfam, there was a 27% difference in pay. There was a difference in the gap pay. Now, this is being in our own company, we have equal pay for equal work. So, and I believe that in the auto sector, at least, we are now moving towards a regime of being equal gender employers, so the gap is definitely narrowing. And we are also seeing that the quality of technical skills that women are bringing in today is helping narrowing the gap. So I think it augurs well for the future.
Hmm. Right. We're totally out of time. Thank you very much for joining us with your perspectives, important perspectives. And we just hope 2024 will be more inclusive for men, for women, and even for those who are not defined as men and women. And it's unfortunate we don't have them on the panel today, but I think India needs to look at that as well. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us.